He called me jobless in front of his friends, so I fired them all from the company that I own. The laughter echoed across the polished surface of our dining table, sharp and bright like shattering glass. My husband, Adrian, raised his glass of vintage Bordeaux, a triumphant smirk playing on his lips. To the Vanguard team, he toasted, his eyes sweeping over the three men from his department, our dinner guests for the evening. Another quarter, another record broken. His gaze then settled on me, seated at the opposite end of the table, and the warmth in his expression curdled into something like pitying amusement. And to my beautiful wife, Evelyn, he continued, his voice dripping with condescension. For holding down the fort here at home. It can't be easy figuring out what to do with all that free time. Mark, his second-in-command and chief sycophant, chuckled on cue. Seriously, Adrian, I don't know how she does it. My wife would go crazy without a project. I just smiled, a quiet, placid expression I had perfected over 5 years of marriage. I let the insult wash over me, another drop in an ocean of subtle and not-so-subtle humiliations. They saw me as a decorative object, a well-dressed woman with a modest inheritance who spent her days managing the household and planning dinner parties. They had no idea that the Vanguard they were toasting, the innovative tech firm where they were building their oh-so-important careers, was my project. I had inherited the controlling stake from my father 5 years ago. I sat on its board, anonymously, through a proxy, and I was, in every sense of the word, their boss. The next morning, when Adrian and his entire team were summoned to an unscheduled, all-hands meeting with the board of directors, he thought he was getting a promotion. He walked in, beaming with self-satisfaction, only to find me sitting in the chairperson's seat at the head of the table. The look on his face as I began my presentation on the restructuring of the marketing department was the most valuable bonus I had ever received. My father, Richard Vance, was a quiet genius who built Vanguard Innovations from a garage startup into a global leader in renewable energy technology. He was a brilliant engineer, but a reluctant tycoon. He hated the ostentatious displays of wealth that came with his success and taught me from a young age that a person's value was in their character and intellect, not their bank balance. When he passed away unexpectedly, he left me his entire 51% controlling stake in the company. I was 28, fresh out of business school, and suddenly one of the wealthiest women in the country. The first year was a blur of grief and overwhelming responsibility. I tried to step into his shoes, to take a public role at the company, but the experience was deeply unsettling. The world, it seemed, was filled with men who saw me not as a person, but as a prize. Suitors came out of the woodwork, their flattery as transparent as their financial motivations. Business associates who had respected my father now spoke down to me, their conversations laced with a patronizing tone that made my skin crawl. I grew tired of being a walking dollar sign. I wanted what my parents had had, a true partnership built on mutual respect and affection, untainted by the corrosive influence of extreme wealth. So I made a radical decision. I created a new identity for myself. With the help of the company's loyal CEO, a man named Arthur Sterling who had been my father's right hand for 30 years, I placed my shares in a blind trust. On paper, the majority shareholder was a faceless holding corporation. I stepped down from all public-facing roles, my presence on the board maintained through a discreet proxy. To the world, and to everyone at Vanguard, I simply vanished. I became Evelyn Vance, a freelance art consultant with a modest trust fund, enough to live comfortably but not enough to attract the gold diggers. I moved to a different city, bought a tasteful but not extravagant apartment, and began the strange, difficult work of building a life where I could be valued for myself. I met Adrian at a fundraiser for the city orchestra. He was handsome, charming, and ambitious, a rising star at a mid-tier advertising agency. He was funny and attentive, and when I told him what I did for a living, he seemed genuinely interested, not dismissive. He didn't care about my family name because he didn't recognize it. For the first time in years, I felt seen. We dated for a year, and it was the happiest I had ever been. He loved my mind, my sense of humor, my passion for art. He never once asked about the specifics of my trust fund, a fact that I found incredibly endearing. When he proposed, I said yes without hesitation, believing I had finally found what I was looking for, a man who loved me for me. The first crack in the facade appeared about 6 months after our wedding. Adrian started complaining about his job. He felt stifled, unappreciated. I have all these ideas, Ev, he'd say, pacing our living room. But I'm stuck in a corporate machine that doesn't reward innovation. My heart ached for him. I saw his potential, his raw, unpolished ambition. I wanted to help, so I made a fateful decision. I called Arthur Sterling. I explained the situation and asked him if there might be a place for Adrian at Vanguard. We could use some fresh blood in the marketing department, Arthur had said, his voice cautious. But are you sure about this, Evelyn? Mixing business and family can be complicated. He'll never know. I had insisted. Just have a headhunter reach out to him. Make it look like they discovered him on his own. He needs to feel like he's earned it. The plan worked perfectly. The headhunter found Adrian's profile on LinkedIn. He was flown out for a series of interviews. He was grilled by department heads and executives. He came home from the final interview, exhausted but exhilarated. I think I got it, he'd said, his eyes shining. A senior manager position at Vanguard Innovations. This is it, Ev. This is the big leagues. He got the job, of course. I had made sure of it. I had reviewed his file, coached the interviewers on what to ask, and given Arthur the final nod of approval. It felt like giving him a secret, wonderful gift. I had used my power to help him achieve his dream, and he was none the wiser. For the first year, it was perfect. Adrian blossomed at Vanguard. He was a natural salesman, and his charisma was a potent weapon in the often dry world of tech marketing. He was promoted to director within 18 months. He was happy, fulfilled, and our life together was everything I had dreamed it would be. But the success began to change him. The man who had been so unimpressed by wealth was now obsessed with acquiring its trappings. We moved from my tasteful apartment to a sprawling minimalist house he designed with an architect. He traded his sensible sedan for a Porsche. His weekends became about golf games at the country club and networking with venture capitalists. And his attitude toward me began to shift. My job as an art consultant, which he had once found so interesting, was now a source of mild embarrassment to him. My wife dabbles in the art world. He'd say at company parties, a description that reduced my passion and expertise to a bored housewife's hobby. He started calling me Jobless, as a joke, a term of endearment that felt more like a judgment. The more his star rose at Vanguard, the smaller he tried to make me feel. It was as if he needed to diminish my life to magnify his own. I let him. I told myself it was his insecurity, a byproduct of his rapid success. I told myself that the man I had married was still in there somewhere, beneath the layers of arrogance and ambition. I continued to play the role of the supportive, unemployed wife, all the while attending secret monthly briefings with Arthur, where I reviewed the company's performance, approved major strategic decisions, and, with increasing frequency, monitored my husband's career trajectory. I saw things that worried me. Adrian was a brilliant marketer, but a reckless manager. He pushed his team to the brink, fostering a culture of fear and competition. He had a habit of taking credit for his subordinates' successes and blaming them for his failures. His expense reports were creative works of fiction. He was a liability, but his department's numbers were stellar, and the board was thrilled with him. He was becoming a monster, but he was a profitable monster, and he was my husband. So I did nothing. I watched, and I waited, hoping he would self-correct, hoping the good man I had married would reemerge. The dinner party was the final straw. He had just landed a massive new client, a deal that would solidify his position as the heir apparent to the C-suite. The deal, of course, had been secretly facilitated by me. I had known for months that our largest competitor was vulnerable. I had fed Adrian the intelligence he needed to craft the perfect pitch, using one of his junior team members as a conduit, so the ideas wouldn't seem to be coming from his jobless wife. He had taken the bait, presented the strategy as his own, and won the contract. That night, he was insufferable. He and his 3 top lieutenants, Mark, Kevin, and another Adrian, whom they called too, spent the entire evening recounting their victory, their conversation a thick stew of self-congratulation and business jargon. I was an afterthought, a silent witness to their triumph. The jobless comment was the culmination of the evening's performance. It was a public declaration of his superiority and my irrelevance. And as his friends laughed, I felt something inside me snap. The years of quiet compromises, of swallowing my pride, of pretending to be less than I was, it all came to an end. The experiment was over. I had tried to find a man who would love me without my money. Instead, I had found a man who couldn't love me without feeling superior to me. As I sat there, smiling my placid smile, I made a new decision. I had given him his dream job. Now, I was going to take it away, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. The morning after the dinner party, I drove to a small, private airfield outside the city. Arthur Sterling was waiting for me on the tarmac beside a sleek Gulfstream jet. He greeted me with a warm hug and a knowing look. "I take it the experiment has concluded," he said as we boarded the plane. "Spectacularly," I replied, sinking into a plush leather seat. Our destination was a secluded estate in the Swiss Alps, the company's private retreat where the most sensitive board meetings were held, far from the prying eyes of the financial press. For the next 48 hours, we planned the coup. Arthur had been documenting Adrian's mismanagement for months. We had a thick file on his unethical treatment of employees, his inflated budget requests, and his habit of using the corporate expense account as his personal slush fund. It was more than enough to fire him for cause. But I wanted more than that. I didn't just want him gone. I wanted him to understand the full scope of his own arrogance. I wanted him to be publicly humbled by the very person he had so casually dismissed. The plan we devised was simple in its elegance. We would call an emergency, all-hands board meeting. The agenda would be deliberately vague. A review of corporate leadership and a vote on strategic restructuring. Adrian and his team would be required to attend to present the details of their new client acquisition. He would walk into that room believing he was about to be crowned king. Instead, he would be walking into his own execution. The most delicious part of the plan was my own reveal. For 5 years, I had been a ghost in my own company. The board knew of me, of course, but only Arthur had ever met me in person. They knew me only as E. Vance, the enigmatic majority shareholder who communicated through encrypted memos and voted by proxy. It was time for me to step out of the shadows. I spent the next day on the phone with headhunters, lawyers, and the other members of the board. I was taking back control, my voice firm and decisive, a voice I hadn't used in years. It felt like slipping back into a familiar, comfortable skin. With each call, I felt the last traces of Evelyn, the art consultant, falling away, replaced by Evelyn Vance, the chairwoman of the board of Vanguard Innovations. When I returned home from Switzerland, Adrian was still basking in the glow of his victory. He was so wrapped up in his own self-importance that he barely noticed my 2-day absence. I had to go visit a sick aunt, I'd told him, a lie he accepted without question, his mind already on the speech he was preparing for the upcoming board meeting. The notice for the meeting arrived in his inbox on a Monday morning. His assistant called me, her voice trembling with excitement. "Mr. Croft has been called to a full board meeting. They want him to present the new client strategy. We all think this is it, the big promotion." I feigned surprised delight. "Oh, that's wonderful. He deserves it so much." Adrian was insufferable for the next 3 days. He rehearsed his presentation in front of our bedroom mirror. He bought a new suit, a Zegna that cost more than my first car. He talked endlessly about his vision for the company, his plans for the future, a future that he now saw as entirely his to command. "Once I'm in the C-suite, Ev," he said the night before the meeting, "we're going to have to make some changes. Your little art hobby is fine, but the wife of a C-level executive needs a more significant role. Chairing a few charities, perhaps. We'll need to manage your public profile more carefully." I just smiled and nodded, the picture of a dutiful wife. "Whatever you think is best, dear." The morning of the meeting, I woke up before him. I chose my outfit with the care of a general preparing for a decisive battle. A bespoke charcoal gray suit, a silk blouse the color of steel, and a pair of understated but lethally sharp stilettos. When Adrian saw me, he raised an eyebrow. "Big day at the gallery." "Something like that," I said, sipping my coffee. I drove to the office separately. "I have an appointment with a new artist," I told him. "I'll see you tonight to celebrate your promotion." He kissed me, a quick, distracted peck on the cheek, and rushed out the door, his new briefcase in hand, ready to claim his kingdom. I arrived at Vanguard headquarters an hour before him, entering through a private underground entrance that led directly to the executive floor. Arthur was waiting for me. "The board is assembled. They are eager to meet you," he said, a twinkle in his eye. I walked into the boardroom. The 12 members, a collection of the sharpest minds in the tech and finance industries, stood up as I entered. They had only ever known me as a name on a document. I could see the surprise and speculation in their eyes. I took my seat at the head of the table, the chairperson's seat, a seat that had been empty since my father's death. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," I said, my voice steady and clear. "Let's begin." We waited. I could see the executive elevator ascending on the security monitor. Adrian and his team, Mark, Kevin, and Adrian too, were laughing, straightening their ties, ready for their moment in the spotlight. The elevator doors opened, and they strode into the boardroom's antechamber, their confident chatter echoing in the marble hall. Adrian's assistant opened the boardroom door for them. "Mr. Croft is here," she announced. Adrian walked in first, his chest puffed out, a triumphant smile already on his face. The smile froze, then slowly melted away as he took in the scene. The entire board was staring at him. Arthur Sterling was standing grim-faced by the window, and his wife, his jobless, hobbyist wife, was sitting in the chairperson's seat. The color drained from his face. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. His team, who had followed him in, stopped dead in their tracks, their own confident expressions dissolving into a shared mask of utter confusion. "Adrian," I said, my voice cutting through the thick, shocked silence. "Thank you for joining us. Please take a seat. We have your performance review to discuss." The next hour was the most satisfying of my life. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't resort to insults. I simply, methodically, and with the cold, detached precision of a surgeon, laid out the case against him. I started with my own introduction, explaining my relationship to the company and the reasons for my long-held anonymity. With each sentence, I could feel the power dynamic in the room shifting, the truth settling over the board members like a physical weight. Adrian had collapsed into a chair, his face a ghastly shade of gray. His friends stood awkwardly by the wall, looking like they wanted to bolt from the room. Then, I moved on to his department. I put up slides, charts and graphs detailing the real numbers behind his supposed successes. I showed the board the inflated projections, the unsustainable marketing spend, the dangerously high employee turnover rate in his division. I presented the anonymous employee testimonials Arthur had been collecting for months, stories of bullying, idea theft, and a toxic culture of fear. Adrian tried to protest, to interrupt. "This is absurd. My numbers have been consistently exceeding targets." "Your numbers," I said, not even looking at him, "are a work of fiction, a very creative but ultimately unsustainable fiction." I then moved on to the final part of my presentation, the ethical violations. I detailed his exorbitant expense reports, the client dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants that I knew were actually dates with other women, the luxury business trips that were nothing more than personal vacations. I had the receipts, the credit card statements, the hotel folios. The evidence was irrefutable. Finally, I turned to him, my voice softening into a tone of mock sympathy. "And then there's the matter of your conduct outside of this office." I looked around the table at the grim-faced board members. As some of you know, I am Adrian's wife. And last week, at a dinner in our home, he and his team here saw fit to mock me for being, in his words, jobless. He wondered what I did with my time all day. I paused, letting the weight of the irony settle in the room. "Well, Adrian," I said, looking directly into his horrified eyes, "this is what I do. I own this company, and I protect it from arrogant, incompetent, and ethically bankrupt managers who believe their own hype. I stood up. The board has held a vote. We have decided on a complete restructuring of the marketing department. Your positions have been made redundant. Your employment with Vanguard Innovations is terminated, effective immediately. Security will escort you from the building. Mark and Kevin looked like they were going to be sick. Adrian, too, was staring at the floor, his face beet red. But Adrian, he just stared at me, a look of pure, unadulterated hatred in his eyes. "You can't do this," he whispered. "I made this department. I made you." I smiled, a real smile this time, cold and sharp. "No, Adrian, you didn't make me. I made you. And as of today, I'm unmaking you. Now, get out of my boardroom." They were escorted out, a pathetic parade of defeated arrogance. They didn't even get to take the personal items from their desks. Those would be couriered to them later. As the door closed behind them, a strange quiet fell over the room. Then Arthur Sterling began to applaud, a slow, steady clap. The other board members joined in. I had not only saved the company from a toxic liability, I had reasserted the values my father had built it on: integrity, honesty, and a profound intolerance for bullies. The divorce was swift. The prenuptial agreement he had been so proud of, the one designed to protect his future earnings, was a joke. All of his earnings had been a salary paid by my company. He walked away with half of our joint savings account and his Porsche. I kept the house, the art, and my 51% controlling stake in Vanguard Innovations. The last I heard, he was working as a consultant for some small, struggling ad agency, a ghost in the industry he had once thought he commanded. His friends had scattered, their careers tarnished by their association with him. I took the helm of Vanguard, not as a ghost, but as its visible, active chairwoman. We rebuilt the marketing department from the ground up, promoting talented people from within who had been silenced and sidelined by Adrian's reign. The company thrived. I had sought a life where I could be loved for myself, not my money. I had learned, in the most painful way possible, that respect was a far more valuable currency. Adrian hadn't respected me, not as a partner, a professional, or even a person. He had seen me as a prop, an accessory to his own ambition. The ultimate irony was that in trying to make me feel small, he had reminded me of how powerful I truly was. He hadn't just mocked his jobless wife. He had awakened the chairwoman, and she was just getting started.